we are part of an extended ET family, and some of us have chosen to allow ourselves to come into this earthly reincarnational, rinse, recycle, repeat thing, right?
Hmm.
We didn't have to. We could have opted out, right? But no, someone had to be boots on the ground. Somebody had to anchor these frequencies and uh, off-world higher energetic frequencies, right? And someone had to willingly, because when we come into this incarnation and we're in these off-world programs, we know that various ET groups, some not always friendly, and especially those aligned with deep black military off-world operations, they have a means of exploiting the latent metaphysical powers we have within us.
Yeah.
When we're in their presence, and some of the ETs do this too, even the good ETs can do this, where we can interface with the ET technology. We can fly craft. We've been taught how to fly craft
Yeah.
in these incarnations, right?
Yeah.
So we're utilized as these assets on world and off world. And I've always seen it, and until proven otherwise, what I feel about it is this: what's going on here in our solar system uh, is an extension of what's been going on with these Orion Wars that have lasted millions of years. It's like some of us have been on both sides of the Orion Wars,
Yeah.
incarnating in this, that, or the
And
other.
isn't that
Uh,
fascinating? I love that you say that and bring that up. We haven't always played, one side or the other. Sometimes we're trying to explore both
we're
trajectories.
trying to exploit both.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Starseed Speak. I'm Rebecca Rose, and I'm here with James Bartley today. Very happy to have you with us for the first time and to introduce you for people who don't know you. But thanks for meeting across so many time zones on my morning and yours. Yeah.
I could wait to be here, Rebecca. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And again, likewise, I think a lot of people know you and your work, but just for those who don't, James Bartley has been investigating and researching alien encounters and the military connection to ETs and ET technology for over 30 years. James has had a lifetime of ET experiences and psychic phenomena and conducted an in-depth investigation into reptilian overlordship and reptilian abductions. And James, you've given lectures in a lot of places, Las Vegas, San Diego, Philly, Memphis, all through Australia, and also the first RepCon Reptilian Conference in England, and more recently at the Full Disclosure Now conference in Florida. And you've put out so much content on your podcast, James, Cosmic Switchboard, and we'll link all of that below for the audience to find you if they haven't already. So again, thanks for being here. I really am, I think I found you first with Evie Lorgan, like years ago, you guys, and I was first coming into like my own memories of Milab and all the awful things that had happened to me. And so I was just really impressed with the intelligence of the conversation right off the bat, and that's kind of where I found you. Again, this was years ago, so I appreciate all of your in-depth research over, as we said, many decades. Um, and my question, I'm leading into a question here. Where did that all start for you? How did you become so interested in such anomalous material? Yeah, going way back.
Started my childhood. I had a number of experiences, and my first that I recall was when I was a young boy living in Texas. My dad was stationed at Naval Air Station Corpus Christi, right on the Gulf of Mexico,
Yeah.
and my family was down there. And I had a daytime, dusk, uh, trending towards early evening encounter in my bedroom with a floating being. It was brown. It was talking to me telepathically. I've told the story before. Uh, And it told me the same thing it tells many other people. You have some destiny to fulfill. You'll be doing something important in the future. But all I wanted was for the stranger to get out of my bedroom and get away from my toys. And, kids can be
Yeah.
very territorial, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how that experience played out. I can go in depth later on if you want me to. But then, like many other people, and I told everyone about that experience, friends, what have you. And then this carried over, moving to the San Francisco Bay Area because my dad was then stationed on board one of the aircraft carriers in Naval Air Station Alameda. And so our family moved to eventually to Daly City, which is right next to San Francisco. And
Mhm.
I was telling all my little friends, my little clique, this is like up to the second grade, third, fourth grade, about that experience. And then it mysteriously left my conscious awareness. I completely forgot about it mysteriously. I went from being obsessed to suddenly it was wiped from my mind. And then decades down the track, on the heels of what I thought was a failed hypnotic regression,
Mm.
what must have happened was the regression had shaken up my subconscious enough
Yeah.
so that a few nights actually later, when I was reading this book by Dr. Kenneth Ring, it was called the UFOs, NDEs, near death experiences, and the mind at large. And in the back of that book, there's a questionnaire. And round about question 17, 20, something like that, there was a question that asked to the effect, as a young child, did you ever see or have invisible friends that nobody could see but you, right? Words to that effect. And I read that question. And the moment I finished reading the question, that childhood experience that I alluded to a moment ago that I
Yeah.
completely forgotten, it almost like a zip file
Yes.
unzipping in my conscious awareness. And it all came back to me in real time, vivid, remembering little nuances. Like, for example, before the appearance of the entity, right before the appearance of the entity, I was standing by the windowsill. We had Venetian blinds, and the slats were opened just enough to let in the waning rays of sunlight. And in so doing, the sunlight through the Venetian blinds illuminated these floating dust particles, right? So
Mhm.
I'm standing there looking, kind of, amused, interested in these little floating dust particles when I sense a presence, turn around and see that ET. And it started talking to me. Well, I had completely forgotten about that until after that regression and I read that question. It all came back to me. Now, when I read that book and that question popped up, I was in the midst of serious research because uh, going back a few years, I come back from a language study course in Germany. By now, it's September 1990. We're living in San Jose, California. My
Mhm.
dad had been stationed 50 miles further south from NAS Alameda down to Naval Air Station Moffett. And
Mhm.
so, in anticipation of that move, my mom and dad purchased a house in San Jose, uh, the northern part of what became the Silicon Valley. So it was a much shorter commute, right? So I come back from Germany in this language study program, and this was September 1990, and then
Mhm.
just within a matter of weeks, I began having all these UFO sightings, alien experiences. One night, an ET was looking out at me through my TV. If you remember in the old days, uh, the television programming would stop. You'd get the national anthem, the color barcodes, and then it would
Color
turn into snow.
barcode. Yes. I remember that.
It would
Yes.
turn into snow and then eventually just fade out. Well, I'd woken up from an experience, and then there was a gray ET looking out at me through the snow, right? And then this culminated in a full blown alien abduction. And I'm
Mm.
skipping over a lot of stuff because a
I know
lot
you
of
are.
things.
There's so much. I know there's always there's hours and hours of content
Yeah.
to this. If you were to speak it all, days probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I worry that if people had already seen me talk ad nauseum about these, they're rolling their eyes. Oh, he's talking about that again. But just to set a little context,
Well, no, and I'm asking you, so you, you have carte
yeah,
blanche
yeah. And so
to
I
yeah.
want to give your listeners and viewers the full effect, so to
Well,
speak.
I'm gonna just interrupt for a moment. I want to say that first experience, very first, is are you about age 4 in the mid to late
Yes.
1960s at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
68, 69 time frame. I would have been four about.
Okay. And this, just to clarify, was something you had just kind of forgotten about. Is that one of the
Yes.
things that you had completely okay. And with
Yeah.
that, was that to your memory now? Was that could you identify the race or the group or
Well,
anything that
if someone comes across, and it's hard to get these days, but if you can find the book Alien Jigsaw, the researcher's supplement, written by the late Katarina Wilson. She was one of the first female abductees to come out about her
Mhm.
Milab and ET experiences. Spoke a lot about her off-world, possibly solar warden type experiences even back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, in that supplement, which is a thin book, there's an illustration of what she calls a type 3 gray.
Hmm.
And in outline, that's what I saw, except it wasn't gray. Uh,
Yeah.
the entity was brown.
Yeah.
But the way my childhood brain processed it after the experience, because I had no natural light in the room, the waning rays of this light were coming in through the Venetian blinds. It was dusk.
Yeah.
To me, it looked gray. And I was telling everyone around me, I saw this little gray man. That's what I called it, a little gray man. But with the benefit of hindsight, the unzipping of the zip file, so to speak, down the track, it was
Yeah.
brown. But it looked gray. And I told everyone at the time that it was a little gray man. But if you
Yeah.
look at that sketch in outline,
Mhm.
the type 3 gray in Katarina Wilson's book, The Alien Jigsaw, the researcher supplement, that's what it looked like. Except it wasn't standing, it was floating in my bedroom.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that whole experience came out later. But by then I was deeply into the subject. See, I'd always been into UFOs, other dimensions, Bigfoot, what have you, from a boy. And I was
Yeah.
obsessed with Greek mythology. Used to always read about Greek mythology.
Yeah.
And then I had stacks of Marvel comic and DC comic books. So the notion of these people or beings that were humanoid, that had superhuman supernatural powers, that was not even anything fantastical or unbelievable to me, because I'd
Yeah.
read so much Greek mythology by then that it touched me at a very soul level that yes, this has been done in the past and it's probably still going on somewhere. And then little did I know that, years down the track, I'd find out I was in these weird off-world programs, my lab experiences and whatnot. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so between age 4 and then you're coming back from the language study program in Germany and you said 1990, so this is a long while later. There were other, I think there were other experiences within that. Yeah.
yes, the ones that stand out, excuse me.
Mhm.
So that would have been with the little brown guy. That would have been circa 68 and more likely 69.
Mhm.
And like I said, my dad had moved the family to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I had what I now know to be a missing time experience. When this would have been circa 70, 72. Uh, and then I always felt as a young boy, also, not always, but frequently, that I felt a presence. I felt like I was being watched. And sometimes it would kind of give me the creeps, but other times I felt that whatever it was, and this is again my young mind trying to process this and make sense out of it,
Yeah.
whatever it was, usually it was a benign, I'm using adult language here, but a
Yeah.
benign, non-threatening presence, whatever it was. I just felt like, oh, there it is again. I'd be in my bedroom, like rummaging through my books or playing with things, right? But I would just feel like I was not alone, that there was something was in there with me. I almost got like a friendly feeling towards it after a while, whatever it was. And
Mhm.
growing up, 72, 74, 75. Come 74, my family moved yet again to San Jose because my dad, like I said, had been stationed at that point at Naval Air Station Moffett. And I began having a bunch of nosebleeds
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
lots of UFO dreams. One
Mhm.
of them was a gleaming silver saucer parking in the busy avenue in front of our house. And oddly enough, and this is just a dream, go figure, or stage managed dream, as I figured out later. Yeah, of course, there would not be any traffic coming and going because that would have spoiled the experience. But what happened was this big gleaming silver saucer landed in the busy avenue in front of our
Wow.
ramp appeared, and then next thing you know, these three big Sasquatch looking guys were coming out of it, towards the house. And in a lot of my dreams, UFO related dreams, and I'm in that old house in San Jose. Not only am I in that old house in San Jose, well, at the time I was in that whole old house, but then later as an adult and after I'd moved out, a lot of my UFO dreams, oddly enough, were back in that house in San Jose. And at times in those dreams, the place would be bereft of furniture. It would just be like wood floors,
Yes.
wood walls,
Barren.
and we
It's
didn't.
barren. Yeah.
Yeah, it's barren, and I'd be in there like huddling
Oh, yeah.
because there'd be a silver saucer outside, right, with three big Sasquatch coming in. Um, so I had dreams like that, nosebleeds. In one occasion, this would have been circa 74, 75. I felt paralysis in my bedroom, couldn't move, and I felt that familiar, long, old, metallic, what we now know was a probe being shoved up my left nostril.
Mhm.
And then I felt the popping, crunching sound sensation, pain, and I blacked out.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
the next morning, my pillow was saturated in blood. And that was just one occasion. And I had many other occasions when I woke up and there was blood everywhere. But that after that particular experience, when I definitely felt the probe going up my nose
Mhm.
and felt the pain when it broke through the cartilage, there was blood everywhere the next morning, right? And I
Wow.
didn't feel that feeling again, at least consciously, until my first full night at my first flat in London in 1987. Fast forwarding even more because
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to London to go to school for a while, and my first night there, after going through a tour of Europe prior, the week or so prior to that, going from one European capital to another, finally I'm in my flat where I can just sleep, for a while until school starts. My
Hmm.
first night, I felt once again this presence, immobilized, and the way my mind processes at the time, right? Despite the fact that I had UFO experiences, contacts, sightings, many UFO related dreams, I had no conceptual framework to try to understand it, right? I just thought that everyone had these kinds of dreams or psychic experiences I didn't know.
Yeah.
But when that happened in 87, the way I process it, well, we're in England. Per capita, England has more ghosts than any other country, right? Because it's such a violent past. So in my mind, it was a ghost that
Oh,
immobilized me,
okay.
paralyzed me.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I now
Yeah.
know. And even leading up to that point, I thought I was being haunted. I was having so many experiences to the point where I was never a Catholic. My mom tried to drag me to Catholic church when I was a boy, but it didn't work, right? But anyway, one after effect of that was I was having so many experiences which I couldn't understand. I placed a Bible next to my bed and I placed a crucifix on top of it, kind
Mhm.
of as a means of protection. And then I go back, I rewind to childhood in Daly City. And I used to leave all kinds of booby traps in my bedroom, like kind of like Home Alone stuff. You trip over a wire and a toy comes swinging down. I used
Yeah.
to do that,
So did this
right?
have an effect on your nighttime experiences? Did it?
Yes, yes. And then, by the time we moved to San Jose later on, I mean, I was so skittish at times because of these experiences were happening. I couldn't understand them. I
Yeah.
would I would lay there beneath a mound of blankets and pillows and cushions and with the bedroom light on. And I'd be there under this mound and I'd
Oh.
have a little like air pocket down there.
Hmm.
And then when the air started to go stale, I'd lift up a corner of the bedding
Yes,
and
and
stick my
like breathe
mouth
in
out.
really quick. Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
did you ever tell your what did you tell your parents? Did you ever tell your mom about that?
Well, I thought there was a ghost. And my mom, coming from the old country, the Philippines, but there's also a very rich tradition, mystical, supernatural. It's kind of like the Filipino kind of mythology, folklore combined with the Catholicism that the Spaniards had brought for so
Yeah.
many centuries, right? So
Yeah.
she had this kind of background where things like monsters,
Yeah.
ghosts, that was all part of the scenery. They're just around, right? So
Hmm.
my mom, and there really was after a while this ghostly figure in our house. Even our German Shepherd saw it and got barked at it.
Yeah.
So to me, I kind of compartmentalized and conceptualized a lot of that stuff is hauntings, ghostly phenomena. And then I come to find out later, which was why I was reading the Dr. Kenneth Ring book, right, that there is
Mhm.
a connection between psychic phenomena and ETs. And it's very common, as you know, in the wake of some of these ET experiences, our psychic abilities become enhanced. Because what began happening when we were living in San Jose, by now, it's like one of those movies where the chronology, you're going back and forth, like in the Oppenheimer movie, right? So when I was in high school, sophomore year, 10th grade, I began having so many out of body experiences, right? And I was always a bit of a reader. So in order to try to understand what was going on in my life, I turned to books a lot of times. So I
Mhm.
found Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body, to try to make sense and gain control of what had been happening. Because it got to the point where if I didn't leave my body for a certain amount of time at night, I'd never get to sleep and I'd just be up all night. And,
Wow.
and so this culminated the out of body stuff when I was laying in bed and I felt the sensation of heat, right? Or like some kind of staticky electricity around my and through my whole body. I really couldn't understand it. But whatever it was making me restless and I was unable to sleep, or so I thought. So then I roll over and then I look, and on the wall, my bedroom wall, there was a big lighted bluish white circle, right? So
Mm.
my mind, I'm trying to process that's odd, right? And so default setting, I roll over and look at the near wall, just didn't have so I didn't have to look at it. Curiosity being what it is, I rolled over, looked over at the other wall again, and by now it's a big lighted blue and white triangle, right? And that really got my attention. So I resolved to get up and take a look at it. And the moment I decided to do that, I was inches away from the wall, right? And
Yeah.
I turned around to look, and there's my body laying there. And by now, I'd had many out of body experiences. And I go, oh, I've been out of my body all this time. But what's this yellow triangle? This like white, bluish white, big triangle doing on my wall. And it was also during that time period when I saw this bluish white beam of light, a shaft of light coming down through the ceiling, doing kind of a search pattern on my bedroom floor. And it was one of those things where, ooh, I'm seeing that. Momentarily, the word alien pops into my consciousness, and I just blot it out. No, no, no.
Like, no,
But
no, no.
yes, yes, exactly. And I just see this thing, just beam of light going on my bedroom. And I, again, default setting, I turned to the wall, right? So
Right.
those things happen intermittently until the big year of 1990, 88, a lot of times too. But I still
Mhm.
couldn't figure it out because I hadn't seen consciously remembered aliens up until that point, right? I hadn't read that book yet that opened
Well,
it
isn't
up
that
where we had
amazing too, as you're speaking, that and I relate with so much of this myself with my brother's story and clients I've seen that like there can be like this marathon of contact experiences and where our mind is so adept at dismissing that which is not within our frame of reference or within our cultural milieu, right? Like, oh, I don't know what's there. So excuse me for
yes,
interrupting, but just wow. Yeah.
no, because that's part of my story was trying to fit it into a conceptual framework that makes sense. And if you don't have the conceptual framework, like for example, because I was always into reading this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Later, when I realized I was a full-blown alien abductee, uh, I'd already read as a young boy, Travis Walton's story, Charles Hickson, Calvin Parker's story. I read that back in the early 70s when I got, these books about the subject.
Mm.
Never dreamed for 1 second
Right.
that I was somehow, mixed up in this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and like getting back to 88 really quickly, my mentor, Barbara Bartley, told me years later that was a big year. She called it the year of the mass abduction, the UFO invasion.
88.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because in that tri-states area where she lived, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Arkansas, North Texas, there was lots of mass abductions, like whole families, streets of people being taken up by ETs, right? And
Wow.
that year, 88, I had lots of dreams of being pulled upwards as if like sucked
Mm.
up by a giant magnet with my arms and legs and head dangling downwards and being
Yep.
pulled upwards, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just kind of your arms and legs just dangling downwards. Right? And on one occasion, well, two occasions actually, one of them in particular, I woke up to find myself on the ceiling with the white bed sheet that I went to sleep in was dangling down off my body, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in the process of being taken through the ceiling again. And on another occasion, when I lived in moved to a different part of the house by this point. It was an addition to the house. My family had, uh, added an extension, and the extension, the ceiling had these big 2x4s at intervals on the ceiling. Now, I must have already started to become non-corporeal, so to speak,
Yeah.
because I was sliding along the ceiling, looking downwards, but somehow avoiding those big 2x4s that characterize the
Yes.
ceiling, right?
Yeah.
So that I must already have been kind of semi-permeable at that point, and once again, just dreamed of being sucked upwards. But come to realize, those were abductions all those times,
And
right?
isn't it shocking when you realize, and I've done this too, and I have chills as you're speaking, James, like when you go, oh, fuck, those were all abductions, and I had no idea. Yeah. It's just shocking. And I don't know, for how was it for you internally when you realized that those were abductions?
What happened was, you remember those? Well, they're still around. Those big yellow legal size writing tablets,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Lined. Well, one day I sat at the dinner table. By now I moved to San Diego, right? This is circa, 92, 93. And, within a year, I became a member in good standing of the San Diego UFO Society, right?
Hmm.
And then my research efforts really took off from that point, eventually getting to work closely with Evie Florian,
Yeah.
before mentioned. So I'm sitting there in San Diego at the kitchen table, and I resolved to write out by hand every odd uh,
Mm.
experience I had through childhood.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was, and this is before I had that, what I thought was a failed regression and all that I talked about
Yeah.
earlier, and the
Yeah.
unzipping of the
Okay.
mind files.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
before all that. So I didn't include that. So after several pages, I realized whatever this is, right? Uh, and this is, I've already had the experience coming back to San Jose. The ETs looking at me through my TV, being abducted by three reptilian greys taken up into their ship. All that stuff had already happened. So I start writing out on this legal pad. After several pages, I go, well, whatever this is, it's been with me since childhood, right? And so by that point, I'm reading every UFO book I can find, alien abduction book, and I eventually joined the San Diego UFO Society, and it was such a relief
Oh
being
yeah.
able to talk to people like us, where
Yeah.
you can just share, and because I'd come from San Jose, which back then was a backwater as far as I'm concerned of UFO research, despite all the hardcore alien weird science underground based stuff that goes on there.
Right, it's
There was
all
just
over.
nobody.
And then okay, yeah, but it must have felt like such a homecoming. And I like what you said when
Yes, it was.
said
It
about like,
was
oh,
getting
speaking to
around
people.
people.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
started going to lectures. Well, our group had a monthly lecture anyway. And then at intervals, quarterly, it seemed, there was always a big UFO conference somewhere in the desert Southwest, whether it's, Southern California or back to Northern California or LA or Orange County or somewhere. There was a big weekend conference. That was a big thing in those days. So I crossed paths with a lot of the well-known, by now legendary UFO researchers, right, at these conferences, and networked and met other people. Uh, and back then, we didn't really have the internet. Of course, we didn't. We just had big
And I
phone
want you
bills,
to
right?
say that to the viewers who might be of the younger generation that like remember books were what we had. We didn't have the internet to look
We
up
we
it.
didn't have the internet. There was, I don't know if the chain still exists, but there was a bookstore chain called B. Dalton's back in the day in America and California. And after I had those series of experiences in September 1990, I would drive 45 minutes. Now I'm living in North County, San Jose. This was in East San Jose, right? I'd have to drive 45 minutes to the East Ridge Mall, and I cleaned out eventually all the UFO, especially alien abduction books out of B. Dalton's, right?
Uh,
And then also, when I go to these conferences, I bring back paraphernalia, literature, like the little catalogs, remember, of all the books and magazines and stuff. I'd bring those back and I'd send away for them, right? Wow,
Yeah.
this is a pretty cool, like audio tapes of a Bob Exler lecture somewhere, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what we did in the old days. We'd send away
And
for.
you're just to clarify, you in your let's say your timeline. This is like you're age 20-ish at this point, or are you?
Well, I was born in November 64, so I'm the
Okay.
last of the baby boomers, 64.
Mhm.
So by now that would have been, 92, 93, 94. But I'm actively conferencing and doing research and all this stuff. So 74, 84, 94 minus two, I would have been
So
28 years old thereabouts.
yeah, late 20s, a lot happening for you. So can I go back and ask you here, when I asked you about the early age four experience, do you feel like the gray has kind of catalyzed this whole thing, or do you have a sense of continuity of a group that was kind of threaded throughout the tapestry of this?
I would say whoever or whatever that being represented, and I just might as well tell you how the experience played out, okay? Just to provide the proper context. I'm in there playing, I'm just minding my own business as usual, and I'm just noting these floating dust particles, right, through the Venetian blinds. Next thing you know, I feel a presence. I turn, there's this floating type 3 gray, actually brown, but looked gray to my young eyes. And it started talking to me. I was just being territorial. Who are you? This is my room. Get out of here, right? And then it just kept talking to me. You're going to be doing great things. People are going to listen to you. I've since come to find out they tell this to virtually everybody. So how special could I be, right? So anyway, that much being said, uh, the more it talked, and this is all telepathic, I
Yes.
could hear
Yeah.
every thought coming out of its head into my head, and I would respond verbally. But I was a little territorial kid. That was my priority. So I said, finally, if you don't leave, I'm going to tell my mom.
Yeah.
My mom was ironing my dad's uh, dark Navy seaman's uniform. And
Mhm.
in North America, when the seamen wear white, uh, when it's their day to wear that type of uniform, that means that it's either spring or summer.
Mhm.
When they're wearing the dark uniform, that's the autumn or winter. So this must have happened the autumn or winter of circa 68, right? Because
Mhm.
my mom was ironing that dark
Dark
seaman's
uniform.
uniform.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
So I went out there. I got so fed up with this little ET that I went out to the living room where my mom was ironing. And I kept telling her, Mom, there's a little gray man in my room. There's a little gray man in my room. My mom just ironing. Like, come on, leave me alone. I'm busy. Finally, I literally grabbed my. Oh, and before I left, I said, I'm going to tell my mom that you're here. The ET told me, I distinctly remember this. Go ahead. She won't see me anyway,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
And they've
Yeah.
done that. Different ETs have done it to me before. They speak in the language of the vernacular, right? Not just these programmed robotic responses. They actually speak, using our jargon sometimes, actually.
Hmm.
So they said, go ahead. She won't see me anyway. So I'm there trying to convince my mom. I lose my patience. I literally grab her by the elbow. She puts the iron down and I drag her to to my bedroom. I fling open the door. Look, of course he's not there, right? My
Yeah.
mom storms off all mad at me to go resume ironing. I
Yeah.
step inside the bedroom. I close the door behind me and it reappears, right? And looks at me. I mean, like that far from me with an expression which with hindsight, I can now look back and say, I mean, it really didn't have facial muscles the way we have, but it
Yeah.
had what I could only describe as a sardonic "I told you so" expression, right?
Oh,
And then it disappeared right in front of me, right?
yeah.
So that was just to provide context that was one type of ET. I saw the reptilian grays. I've seen mantises. Seen reptilians. I've seen Nordic looking beings like human, like Nordic Palladian looking guys.
Can I
And there's
ask
probably
you?
some other beings too that I really can't. Now, I know when I work with people, very psychic people that can really plug into one's ET guides and extended
Mhm.
ET family. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a plethora of different kinds of ETs
Yeah.
that are in my background. And also, my family has a history in this because it turned out that my dad and also my uncle on my mom's side were my dad more so uh, covert operations, Vietnam War.
Yes, and I was going to ask you about this because you've got military in the family. He was
Yes,
just as I did, and this is so salient
yes,
in the conversation
and
for
so
me.
so
Yeah.
and I didn't even talk about the the childhood illnesses, the mysterious childhood illnesses that I had, leading up to adulthood, because I was having all these childhood issues, and my parents, being, doting, concerned parents, they took me to specialists. If it was an emergency situation, they take me to a civilian hospital. But if it was just like a regularly scheduled appointment or a specialist appointment, of course, being a Navy dependent, they took me to military hospitals.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so a
Yeah.
lot of the places that I've been to as a young child that I had a total missing time, lost memories of, because the doctors often is not, and people must understand uniform code of military justice. You don't just say, boss, I'm not coming in. I don't feel well today. Military personnel have to go in, get checked out by a physician, and given like a non-work shit that day or whatever. They practically have to be at death's door to not have to do their duty on any given day. So it was the same thing with the kids, right? We naturally were taken to these military specialists who tended to be, in terms of military rank, from a Navy perspective, lieutenant commander, commander, captain. A captain is equivalent, a captain in the Navy is equivalent to a colonel in the Army, Air Force, and Marines. It's one rung short of general, flag officer, admiral level, right? So when a captain, in our example, says to an enlisted man like my dad or my mom, give him these pills prior to driving him to this specialist appointment or that, they're going to do it. It's not because my parents were in on it and they're Illuminati. That wasn't the case. It was like
Yeah.
they're
They're following
you know,
orders. I mean,
they're
it's
following orders.
it
Like
is what it is.
countless people bring children to pediatricians, and what that's
Yeah.
what happens, right?
Yeah.
So uh, they gave me these car sickness pills, which effectively knocked me out, right? And I was taken to Oak Knoll Naval Hospital in Oakland, notorious mind control center. I find out later on, the Presidio,
Oh, the
Army,
Presidio. Yeah. Wow. Famous Presidio.
yeah,
Yeah.
Army Letterman General Hospital at the Presidio. Uh, Balboa Naval Medical Center in San Diego. All those places I've been to turned out to be mind control centers later. I had a lot of mission time. So when I realized, I put it all together later. I still haven't figured it out, but I got a broader outline now, right, of understanding.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, but even as a young child, I was plugged into the military side of things, because being a military dependent, the deep black elements of the military, in particular naval intelligence, they would have access to those medical records,
Yes.
especially, uh, there must be a marker, a genetic marker, something in our genetic profile that marks you and I out, Rebecca, as people that have these types of experiences, right? There's some kind of marker, some kind of ETDNA or something
Well, and that was one of
in
my
our,
questions to you today, at some point was like, how were you flagged? How do you conceptualize that? There's so many elements. I understand that.
yes.
There's a few things. And it was well, do you want to say anything to that now, or should we circle back to that?
Well, I think that was part of it, is that well, even if I was a civilian and came from a civilian family in this life, they would have found out about it, because so many of our Milab colleagues out there, they're civilians, and
Yeah.
they may have some military background in their family. I talked to Dr. Carla Turner about this, and she said, well, you know what? I used to think that there's definitely a military connection, and almost exclusively, these my labs come from military type families. But then I thought about it. This is what Carla was telling me, and she and I had a good discussion about this. If you look into just about anyone's background, they could be a foaming at the mouth, the military hating liberal. But if you look in their background, uncles, people, there's going to be military
There's
people
going
there.
to be military somewhere. Was your father working with a clearance? Was he working in deep
Well,
black?
in the Vietnam War, he did two tours in the Brown Water Navy. Those little patrol boats go up and down the canals of the Mekong Delta and the big rivers and what have you. Very dangerous job. And extracting special forces like Navy SEALs and Australian SAS, et cetera, et cetera. So that was in his background. He did two tours of that. And
Mhm.
then I come to find out later that much against his will, he'd been sheep dipped into some kind of intelligence operation. And
Okay.
even after he got out of the Navy and he was working at the post office by then, there was this shadowy intel background going on, which he didn't want any part of and didn't like being a part of, right? As they felt like they still had their hooks in them for some reason. And so here I come into the world and have to go to all these military hospitals. On one occasion, I woke up in one of these military hospitals with all these wires sticking out of my head, right? As a young
Mm.
boy, this would have been, circa early 70s, so I would have been uh, 8, 9 years old or younger, right? So, and then years later, when I started investigating the reptilian military connection, especially the high desert of Southern California, after a while, the people that I got to know, that I visited and worked with a lot in the high desert, I started having my lab experiences with some of the people, my lab friends in the high desert. And the way my mind was working was, well, I guess the military is showing up now because I'm hanging around Lorena and we're here in the high desert. We're investigating these reptilian naval intelligence underground bases, these jointly operated underground
Yeah.
bases that we've been
Yeah.
taken into, right? So that's the way my mind was processing. Oh, they know I'm here doing all this research. That's why they're starting to abduct me. No, I realized later that it was connected to all the times I was taken to these, woo woo medical. Sorry, I'm kind of asthmatic. I mean, taking all these woo woo medical clinics, when I was a boy, that's where
Mm.
the twain met, right? So
Mm.
it was a continuous thing. I just didn't realize till later that I was literally born into this.
And do you feel like your father, I want to ask you also about your uncle, the mystery man, but your dad, do you feel like he was abducted or did he have paranormal experiences or things that were out of the ordinary?
When, like, I was a precocious reader as a boy, so mostly military history, but a lot of stuff about mythology, monsters, Bigfoot, things like that, right?
Mhm.
So on one occasion, I showed this book that had a lot of these illustrations. It was monster folklore from around the world, right? And there was all these really cool illustrations. Some of these illustrations go back, centuries, right, of demonic entities and what have you, Asmodeus and all these different types of beings. And then there was an aquatic creature, right, which really stuck out to me. It was like creature of the Black Lagoon stuff, right? But it was
Mhm.
an illustration that was very old, and it was reproduced in this book. And I showed it to my dad on a whim. I go, "Oh, look at this!" And he says, "Oh yeah, in the Philippines we have those, right?"
Mhm.
Now, what's interesting is if you talk to the old timers in the Philippines, and I'm sure in other countries, they'll tell you about some of these stories of like Asawang, which translated comes out to kind of vampire monster vampire, right? And it's in a lot of the uh, cultural folklore in the Philippines, it's taken for granted that they're real, just like in many places, like in New Orleans, vampires are considered real, for example, right?
Yeah.
And they have reason to think that I would say. So I wasn't surprised when my dad gave me that response. Oh yeah, we have those in the Philippines, right? They swim around the ocean, whatever. And then my mom would always say, and my aunt Rose, who was my favorite aunt, she was the next. My mom was the youngest in the family, and then her next older sister was my aunt Rose. And she would ask me about aliens and UFOs and talk about some of her
Yeah.
experiences. And her and my mom, interestingly enough, both had scoop marks on their shins
Oh,
the way
wow.
I do. I do. I
Mhm.
was to this day I can see this scoop that was taken out of my right kneecap,
Mhm.
and below that in the shins I'd had scoop marks and what have you. So just eyeballing it, I would look. That looks a lot like a scoop mark on my mom and my aunts. Right, you begin to notice such things after a while, right? And then also some of my friends growing up. By now I'm in high school in San Jose. So my high school party friends in my neighborhood turned out they were having alien abductions too, because like I said, San Jose was a hot spot, a very deep, dark, weird science alien um, type place is San Jose,
Mhm.
California, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people were having experiences there. It turns out as I grow up, I found out some of my best friends, some of the guys in my neighborhood, they'd had experiences too. This gal reached out to me. I hadn't heard from in years, right?
Mhm.
She heard me on a podcast. That looks a lot like James Bartley, right?
Oh, and she
So
found you.
so
Yeah.
she looks me up,
Yeah.
finds me, and then sends me an email. And I was good buddies with her brother, who told me about his UFO experiences and sightings too. But she told me, and she lived right across the street from me, pretty much like catty corner, right? There in San Jose. Yeah, she was having like missing time, bedroom encounters, all kinds of stuff, right? And so I come to find out later that San Jose was a hot spot, and so my family being immersed in that, and on one occasion, by now I'm living in San Diego, but I was working at, of all places, get this, I was working at a Commander Naval Air Force's U.S. Pacific Fleet at the headquarters there at Naval Air Station North Island. If you're familiar with William Tompkins' story, Naval Air
Mhm.
Station North Island, San Diego, I worked there. Okay,
Oh God.
and
What were you, what, in what capacity were
well,
you,
I was a civilian,
yeah.
and I'd gotten a job in the civil service. It was funny because when I passed the federal exam, right, I'd sent out my resume every spooky place you can think of: China Lake, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base,
You did. You were
Vandenberg,
actively
Edwards.
trying to get in there.
I was trying to
Okay.
infiltrate, right?
Okay.
It sounds corny now, okay, but I was trying to infiltrate, but yeah, I didn't get any offers. I just got, well, thanks but no thanks responses from all those places. However, the air station right there where I was living in San Diego called me in for interviews, and my first job there was at air training, for the Naval Air Forces, and I got to know. I basically worked for each naval aviator or naval helicopter pilot that sat at the various desks. Like this guy was the Tomcat, training guy. This guy was the,
Mm.
Hornet training guy, whatever the case may be. Well, the guy that was the P3 Orion guy that wrote up the syllabus for the training for all of the Pacific aviation, right? For the P3 Orion, uh, he went by the call sign Rowdy, right? Now, Rowdy was like me. He was from the San Francisco Bay Area. He lived there in Livermore. In fact, his son um, knew Edward Teller and had worked, if memory serves, at Lawrence Livermore Lab, right? So he had that. Remember that frequent flyer thing where you can just fly like in your own state, but only like $40, right? If you went with a buddy. So
Hmm.
every once in a while, I say, "Hey James, I'm going back to the Bay Area this weekend. You want to come along?" Oh, yeah, why not? So um, on one occasion, I was sitting with Rowdy. Rowdy had his back to the airport terminal window, there at Oakland. Uh, was it Oakland? Yeah, it was Oakland. We're waiting to come back to fly back to San Jose, San Diego, and there was this gleaming silver saucer that flew behind him along the length of the runway
Oh,
and
right at the airport.
at the airport. And
Yeah.
Rowdy had his back turned to me, was talking. I didn't even say what just happened. He just went on this rant about women getting pregnant prior to carrier deployments, and he's sick of it. When he was a squadron commander, he didn't allow it after a while. I don't know how he did that, but he just going on this rant. These ET, some of them, they do have a sense of humor. They'll do things that at times, when you zoom out, they're kind of comical, right? So this gleaming silver saucer flies right across the runway there. I don't even bat an eyelash, and Rowdy just keeps talking. But anyway, I don't even remember why I went on this rant about Rowdy. And oh yeah, I was working at, um,
You were
uh,
working down there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was working
Yeah.
there, yeah. And so I took a job there, and I first worked at air training, and then after that, I worked in communications. I
Mm.
had access to a lot of classified message traffic, and with my
And
background
and
studying military history.
did this ultimately illuminate the path of research for you? Like, did it give you insight into the realm of
Yeah,
those of military abduction and so on, and DUMs
yes,
and
it did,
kill
and it
assignments?
showed me in stark contrast how there's this line of demarcation. You have the surface level military types. Larry Warren experiences in spades at RAF Bentwaters in the aftermath of that mass encounter with 40, 50 Air Force personnel at the clearing in Rendlesham Forest, Capel Green. He was deemed a whistleblower, and then a couple of days later, he was taken underground there at RAF Bentwaters, where there was a whole setup. Aliens were there. There was some of the park craft that they'd seen up on the surface flying around or moving through the woods were there, parked underneath this underground facility, etc. Well, there's also an underground base there at North Island. I know because I astrally broke into it. See,
Mm.
because there was a point in time, I don't do this anymore, but I used to like astrally break into some of these facilities, right? Just to snoop around. And
Hmm.
North Island was one of them that I went underground to. So, of all places, I wind up working there. And there's even a karmic connection which I won't get into. It'll take too long. But
Mm.
not only was my dad formerly in the carrier aviation part, stationed on two different aircraft carriers and what have you. ComNav Air Pac is the parent command for all the aircraft carriers in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf. Okay, that's the headquarters base, and I worked there right at the nerve center.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the twain meets, where I was going through a spate of harassment, right? And I was in communications by this time. And if you can imagine a rectangle, my desk was facing the center of the room, and I would be, from your perspective, I would be on the right side of the
Mm-hmm.
room of a rectangle, and I'm here, and the windows are here that face out onto the front of the headquarters, right? Now, the admiral's parking spot is out front of the headquarters, and it was at a diagonal from where I'm sitting, right? Because I'm not sitting directly in front of the windows with my back to it. And this is in the aftermath of the John Walker spy scandal. So they deemed that all these military naval communications facilities needed to have hedges and leafy trees by the windows and barred windows, right? So I'm sitting there, and this shows you how much they know about you,
Mm.
because they were harassing me with so many of these phone calls, and you'd answer them and you hear all these clicks, and they knew exactly when I'd walk into the front door at
And
home.
this is,
Uh,
I just want to clarify for everybody, this is human harassment or ET?
is human, but I'm going to get to the alien
Okay.
connection harassment
Okay.
also, because I kept getting all these harassing phone calls, clicks, and it would even hear recordings that I would listen to of people walking around, and your mind runs away with what's going on. You
Yeah.
try to
I get
interpret all these sounds you're hearing, uh, and the phone calls followed me to work. And when we answered the phone, we had to remind the callers that they're on a non-secure line. Otherwise, they might start blurting out classified information, right? When we call any other department or office code, the same thing. They have to remind us that we're on an open line, right? So I had a spiel, staff communications, ComNav AirPack staff communications is a non-secure line. James speaking. Can I help you? Even before I got that blurb out, click, 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 like it was maddening. And they were ringing all the extensions in all the different rooms of our department, right? We were at one end of the corridor, the lobby, what they call there's a naval name they have for the lobby. And then the other end of the corridor was where Naval Security Group was, the naval version of NSA, right?
it.
So in my office, we had like two, three offices all connected. All the phones would ring and people would answer them, these Navy personnel, and they'd hear clicks, right? And so it was all directed at me because it would just increase the paranoia. People were saying, is someone pranking us? What's going on? All these clicks going on. And what happened on one occasion, I'm sitting there pondering all this, right? I get a strong sense of being watched. So I turn to my right and I look through the gaps in these leafy branches right outside the window and through this hedge and through the steel bars.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking out diagonally to where the Admiral's parking spot is. Nobody parks in the Admiral's parking spot besides the Admiral's flag lieutenant driver, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that parking spot, I see a white sedan with in black stenciled letters on the side, U.S. Marine Corps. In the passenger seat, I see a very tall, what we would call like a Nordic alien or a Nordic hybrid,
Mm-hmm.
very tall, square jawed, blonde, sandy brown hair, just glaring at me and just pushing all these malevolent thoughts of what it wanted to do to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I look to the driver's seat right next to the Nordic, and there's a guy so tall, I only saw up to his shoulders. He was wearing a woodland camouflage pattern uh, uniform,
Mm-hmm.
and he was speaking into a big walkie-talkie, making a big spectacle out of it. And the Nordic guy, a big square jawed, archetypal, right out of Central Casting,
Yeah.
square jawed, like angry expression. Some of these hybrids are psychotic and violent, actually. Some of them are. And just pushing, and it was wearing a blue flight suit, a blue tight fitting flight suit, which was bizarre, right? And it was just looking at me, just blasting me with all this hate and
Was it
malign
giving you
intent.
instructions in any way or like
They were all just threats. It wasn't even
okay.
anything. It wasn't anything even verbalized,
Yeah. It's
telepathic
all
thoughts. Like,
telepathic. It's so much goes
yeah,
on fast and
so
telepathic.
it
Yeah.
was telepathic, but it was more just like murderous intent. It wasn't even
Okay.
words. It was like, we're gonna get you, we're gonna get you, kind of stuff, you know. Uh,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this. I'm sitting here watching this, and again, they parked in such a way that only I could see them parked there. You
Yeah.
know, because its focus was so intense, it drew me to it, my attention, and I had to peer through the blades of, the leaves in order to see them. But see them
Mhm.
I could. So I went through a spate of a lot of harassment because of
Yeah.
the research I was doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I bet you're kind of wearing two hats at that point, I feel. Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping all over the place.
no,
So is there
no,
any direction you
there's so
want to
much
take
to
this?
cover when we talk about a lifetime of anomalous, trauma and abductions in Milab and these things in your research, but there is a lot. So thank you. And do you feel like this, I would say, looking at my own history, it runs in families, and that's why I was curious to ask about your father. Both of your parents were Filipino descent, is that correct? Or
My mom, Filipino with a lot of Chinese on her mom's side. If you look
okay.
at an old picture, which I never knew my maternal grandmother, she passed away before I was born, uh, and she looked like a Chinese lady.
Yeah.
So my mom looks more Chinese actually than she does Filipino. But there's
Mhm.
also the Spanish Portuguese background too, because like many Filipinos, they have my mom's side of the family have the Spanish surname, right? And my dad's side of the family is Filipino but also Spanish and Portuguese because of that long occupation.
Okay.
And um,
Yeah.
and so through my mom's Chinese bloodlines, that's where I believe my Chinese dragon bloodlines go back to, like
Okay,
ancient, ancient.
I knew we were gonna get there. I knew there was like something really extraordinary back in there in the why of why was James,
Like a
Bartley.
total dragon type connection going
Yes.
back to ancient China.
Oh my God. Powerful, so powerful. And the dragons have had such a, unbeknownst, I mean, unsought by me. I've had a lot of dragon interactions, and that's a potent line to get into. And I could see why that would be desirable. There's certain traits that they want when they're looking for abductees and people to be in these programs and people to co-opt. I mean, wouldn't you say?
Well,
There's
yes,
so
because
much
of
they're
the
looking for. Speak to that.
well, it's
Yeah.
well, there's the latent metaphysical powers, for lack of a better term, but also the metaphysical powers that we all know people that are quite intuitive and quite gifted.
Yeah.
Puts my psychic abilities to shame. Some of these people are so good, it's just astounding. And of course, it doesn't surprise us that some of these people that are extremely gifted, they're the ones that seem to be targeted the most.
Yeah.
If they can't co-opt them, they try to ruin their lives in so many ways that they neutralize them as a potential threat down the track, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Um, wow. Were you, gosh, do you feel looking at this now that there was any kind of, because we're getting back beyond the birth of you in this incarnation, we're talking about, more etheric connections. Was there any kind of soul plan or soul like something at the soul level that you might have been playing out with all of this or things you were looking to discover?
I've had the great good fortune of knowing very well world class, what I would consider to be world class past life readers, past life remote viewers, uh, mediums, not just in a deceased uh,
Yeah.
spirit world
Yeah.
perspective, but also really, really good at plugging into or allowing themselves to be plugged into by our extended ET family, our ET guides, if you will, because
Yeah.
we are the sum of all of our parts.
Yeah.
We have these past parallel incarnations, not just on Earth, but elsewhere. There are counterparts of us, as you know, that are, for lack of a better term, what we would call aliens, right?
Yeah.
And a variety of different types of ET civilizations. And I believe that some of us will even do what I call an incarnational infiltration. We will at times incarnate as a Draco or as a reptilian or
Yeah.
be part of that malevolent. I'm not saying all reptilians are bad. I'm saying that there are
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
abducting ones and what have you. And some of us have actually had incarnations in those cultures and civilizations.
Yes.
What better way to understand them than to have been them? And this carried over in a linear time sense, and we know things can get tricky when you enter time travel into the whole
Of
equation. That's
course.
a
Yes.
whole nother
Yeah.
story. But just what I know of my uh, incarnations here on Earth in a linear sense. Many of my key lives, not all of them to be sure, but many of my key lives, I was a warrior. I was a military person. I had command responsibility in a number of. And I wasn't always the good guy. I was an invader in some of
Mhm.
these incarnations, right? Uh,
Yeah, and I really appreciate you speaking to this because sometimes that comes up in client work that I do with others that like, sometimes we do like my own incarnation to move into the secret space program. I think it was gathering intel in a lot of ways or trying to understand in this case the galactic slave trade and what was really going on deep in the belly of that.
yes, yes, because what I think has gone on is people like you and I definitely would like to have you on my show. You can give my listeners and viewers an earful about this from your perspective.
Yeah.
That we are part of an extended ET family, and some of us have chosen to allow ourselves to come into this earthly reincarnational, rinse, recycle, repeat thing, right?
Hmm.
We didn't have to. We could have opted out, right? But no, someone had to be boots on the ground. Somebody had to anchor these frequencies and uh, off-world higher energetic frequencies, right? And someone had to willingly, because when we come into this incarnation and we're in these off-world programs, we know that various ET groups, some not always friendly, and especially those aligned with deep black military off-world operations, they have a means of exploiting the latent metaphysical powers we have within us.
Yeah.
When we're in their presence, and some of the ETs do this too, even the good ETs can do this, where we can interface with the ET technology. We can fly craft. We've been taught how to fly craft
Yeah.
in these incarnations, right?
Yeah.
So we're utilized as these assets on world and off world. And I've always seen it, and until proven otherwise, what I feel about it is this: what's going on here in our solar system uh, is an extension of what's been going on with these Orion Wars that have lasted millions of years. It's like some of us have been on both sides of the Orion Wars,
Yeah.
incarnating in this, that, or the
And
other.
isn't that
Uh,
fascinating? I love that you say that and bring that up. We haven't always played, one side or the other. Sometimes we're trying to explore both
we're
trajectories.
trying to exploit both because getting back to the world class remote viewers I've worked with, and I won't go into details here privately. I'll tell you this stuff, but it turns out that people like you and I, in some of these past parallel alien incarnations, we were players in the Orion Wars. We did operations. We commanded. We were in command positions where we commanded like squadrons, fleets of spacecraft. We did
Yeah.
off-world operations. We interacted, and there's this uh, off-world slave operation that we've been talking about. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Uh, I was just kind of watching some of the old William Tompkins interviews and
Oh yeah.
some of
Yeah.
the people that I'd spoken with. Like I know Niera easily. I
Hmm.
met her like circa 92 or
Yeah.
earlier in Las
Yeah.
Vegas, right?
Hmm.
Misha Johnson introduced me to her. Uh,
Hmm.
and and I got to know Niera. I'm quite familiar with her story, at least as
Yeah.
she told it back then. I'm sure a lot of stuff's happened since, but her story. She was taken off world, and I've heard
Hmm.
this from other people. They'll take them off world, whether they're active military personnel, like in Niera's case, or civilians. They'll take them off world, take them to the moon or some other place. They'll hand them a broom, clean his
Hmm.
warehouse,
Hmm.
basically slave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
stacking boxes in warehouses. I mean, menial kinds of laborious tasks that
Hmm.
you would find in any warehouse here on Earth. Sometimes they'll do this to people like us, and then that's the mild kind of slave labor compared to
Yeah.
what other people
Yeah.
have gone through, right?
Yeah. There's so many different forms of enslavement. I
So
mean,
many different forms, yes.
Well, is there something in your research across the board over all these years? I know, I mean, we could be talking here for hours. I know we have a time limit today, but that you see in my labs and people who are taken into the SSP, do you see any particular, oh, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, um, or, you know,
Well,
we spoke to the
definitely,
military influence. We've certainly gotten that, and
yes.
they gravitate to people who have abilities, psychic abilities, whether they're latent or developed in this incarnation or not. Those two things, but any and the bloodline issues, the bloodline.
Bloodline issues.
Yeah.
Because I think that even if for some reason, let's say our medical records slip through the cracks, or uh, these deep black weird science medical
Yeah.
military projects aren't aware of us for some reason. At
Hmm.
some point, we're going to break the surface and start doing podcasts or whatever the case may be. But I also think that some of these alien races that they're uh, in league with, let's say, will tell them, well, you kind of overlook this person over here, this family, what have you. Because
Huh.
what happens is, let's say that there's a lot of ET activity in a given neighborhood in San Jose, where I'm from, right? That's going to show up on their sensors. A lot of these craft give off these emissions, oftentimes in a microwave frequency bandwidth, and sensors are attuned to pick up that activity. And if it continues, they'll begin sending black helicopters and their own UFOs there to investigate. They'll do backgrounds in everyone in that neighborhood, and they'll zero in. They'll find somebody. But I think that sometimes aliens will say, "Look, it's this person right here. Start bringing that person in."
Hmm.
If you're familiar with Dan Sherman's story, he was from the womb. He was tampered with from the womb. We've heard this from many other people
Hmm.
by ETs to enhance his psychic ability, because he was groomed not only by the Zeta Grays, faction of the Zeta Grays, but by a deep black element of the Air Force Security Service, which is part of the NSA. From an early age, his mother was an alien abductee. In the womb, he was augmented and enhanced so that he would eventually be groomed and plugged into Project Preserve Destiny. This is the early 1970s. He was trained and briefed into the story. Just to tell your listeners that may not be familiar with the story, his job was eventually to become an intuitive communicator, an IC, where he'd be telepathically communicating with these Zeta Grays. And it turned out that the information that was always telepathically sent by these Zeta Grays always turned out to be a long serial number designation
Yeah.
and latitude and longitude coordinates and a
Hmm.
timestamp. And he realized the number designation identified a particular alien abductee. The latitude and longitude was where they abducted and returned, presumably, the person.
Hmm.
And there was a timestamp and a date stamp, right? Of when they did this and when they returned them, etc.
And to
And point
clarify,
blank,
he knows this because he was actually the relay for the information from the Grays. Is that
yes,
correct?
he was taking this information and people like him, colleagues, and giving it to their superiors in Air Force Security Service. Maybe it was a means to check. We know that the aliens at some level double crossed. This whole deal of the technology for allowing us to abduct a limited number of people, right?
Hmm.
That goes back to the whole Eisenhower Treaty and
Yes, it does. And
perhaps
yes.
even before that, for all we know. And so, right off the bat, if he's getting just dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of these types of messages, each message referring to a specific individual that's being abducted by just that group of ETs, not any of the other ET groups that the elements of the military are involved with, just that particular group. And whoever that group of ETs is aligned with, this is always a bigger zoomed out picture. By process of elimination, statistical probability, some of those people that the Zetas are telepathically transmitting about have to be my labs, have to be, right?
Hmm.
So, okay, so if you're just looking at the broad numbers coming back, being picked up by Dan Sherman and his crew, let's say conservatively 10% of those people are my labs.
Hmm.
Okay. So out of 1,000, there'd be 100. And let's say within that 100, that 10%, some are my labs, but some are also used in off world sense, time travel, alternate reality. I mean, the sky's literally the limit. We now
Hmm.
know that not only are they capable of doing this, but I've had to, revise our timeline. It's like, how far back do these alien human alliances go back to. And time travel being what it is,
Yeah.
it's like there's no telling when or
We
how
can't
far.
really trace it in a linear fashion.
You
It's all
can't
so
trace it in a
quantum.
linear sense
Yeah.
because I was used in a time travel op, and I was coming back from 1939, and I was given to understand for some reason uh, the notion that I had been sent back to Spain in the 1930s during the Spanish Civil War, right? Franco's Spain, the fascists fighting the communists, what have you. For some reason, me and another very well-known person in our field had been sent back. It had to do with Franco, gold, just some of the things that stick with me. Anyway, on the way back, somehow or other, me and this other person were waylaid, and we were harshly interrogated by two women, one of whom sounded like she was from the subcontinent, Indian, Pakistani, something. I
Mm.
don't know who or what agency or country she represented, but she tried to interrogate me. I pretended I was drugged out, just lolling my head back and forth, and I probably was under some kind of mind control or narco
Oh.
hypnosis. And then my friend, she caught on and started to kind of pretend to be drugged out too, but they really harshly interrogated her. And somewhere along the line, we might have been re-abducted again because somehow or other we were pulled out of the clutches of those two whack job women. And the next thing you know, this other person and I were walking in what appeared to be, could have been simulated to look like, or actually did look like, a very large airport terminal that was empty, could have been underground, I don't know. And the people that were leading us were actually dressed in uniforms that were like reminiscent of airline uniforms, like when you're in an airport and you see a flight crew walk by, right?
Hmm.
Flight attendants, pilots, they have uniforms.
And this is time
So
travel back into the 1930s. Am I following you accurately here?
yes,
Okay.
I had come back from the late 1930s and then was harshly interrogated by this crazy, weird woman from India somewhere. Um, Either they let us go or someone nabbed us from them. And next thing you know, we're in this big airport looking place being led into the corporate office section down a corridor, took us into one of these uh, offices, and they began scanning us with a device that looks like this, and
Oh. Hmm.
and they were looking for implants, right?
Hmm.
And because just to check if either ETs or someone else had gotten a hold of us and like re-implanted this or took something out. So my friend, she has an implant beneath, I think, her left or right foot. And there are times, whether she's being beamed or something else is going on, she can feel that implant buzzing in her foot, right? And her foot could be inflamed, starts turning, the soles of her feet turning red, that kind of thing. She says that when they wave that wand detector, uh, at the soles of her feet, like they knew it was there, it started beeping and she felt it buzzing, right?
Mm.
So, and then the experience us all, I remember they returned us, right? But, and another occasion, I had this long, I'm not going to get into it, long training experience in an underground cavern. And then it morphed where I was tasked with infiltrating this big mansion with like a moat around it, right? And at one point, I was swimming underwater without any breathing apparatus underwater in this canal, and alongside of me and a little higher above me was some kind of Navy frogman guy getting pulled along by some kind of little motorized board. I'm thinking, well, that's convenient, right? Meanwhile, and I've had these experiences when I've been underwater, able to swim without any breathing gear, but, and also immersed in tanks like
Yeah.
glass, transparent tubes. And if you remember those in beauty salons where they would have these flat containers, flat tubs, circular the tubs that they call them in Australia, but it would have that like either white or like pinkish kind of like hair gel, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, that consistency, it seemed to me, where I'd be immersed in that or something like it. It could have been more water added or whatever, but I'd be able to breathe in these tanks where I'd be immersed in that stuff. And I've since come to find out they've been working even at a surface level. There are videos out there probably that show like mice and rats able to breathe immersed in some kind of a liquid solution, right?
Yeah.
So there were times when I was in these tanks where I could breathe, and it could have been the lighting. Sometimes I'm thinking it was either lighting or maybe there were times they put me in an amber pinkish kind of liquid that was similar to the white transparent liquid, and
Yeah.
I could breathe. And when I stand up, oddly enough, it doesn't stick. There's weird aspects to some of the
Hmm.
stuff they put us in.
Were
Point
they, and
being is that
you mentioned this being a kind of training, am I hearing you correctly that that was a training for something?
yes, because I'm just giving a little background because in the scenario after I was in these underground caverns that had a lousy experience where they're trying to train me to do certain things, and then I found myself on the surface, what appeared to be the surface of somewhere, and I was tasked with breaking into this big mansion, for lack of a better term, but there
Mhm.
was a big moat outside of it, all the way around it, and I was swimming in this canal underwater. I was breathing underwater, and it happened to me on a number of occasions. I can swim, but I'm not a strong swimmer. But somehow in some of these experiences, I can run a long time and I could swim a long time,
Mhm.
which normally I couldn't do, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, I make my way, I get out of the water, and now I infiltrate into this uh, big mansion. And let me just fast forward to the end of that story. I'm standing by this big window. The drapes became animated, wrapped themselves around my lower half, hoisted me upwards, and I go, whoa. Next thing you know, I'm back in my tiny studio apartment in San Diego. I'm suspended up above my bed. My lower half, hips down to my feet, are extended upwards where my feet was. So my center of gravity didn't even make sense, right?
Mhm.
So like I'm kind
Yeah.
of like this, a few feet above my bed, and here's my head down here, and then they just
Yes.
drop me, right? So
Oh, that sounds so similar to James. I've had those
yeah,
experiences. Yes.
yeah, the idiots drop us. Well, Daryl Sims told me of a case where the idiot ETs dropped a couple of brothers into a swimming pool in an apartment complex in Texas, and they drowned. Right, and then there was a story I think in Australia where a woman kind of went into a fugue state, um, and her you know left her kids in her car, and she was found miles away wandering around, in a fugue state. And I'm thinking that lady may have been abducted, and now they're going to go after her for abandoning her kids and neglect and all this other stuff. I mean, we have to factor these things in. But anyway, point being was, uh, when I woke up from that horrendous experience, right after they dropped me off above my bed, I looked over at the uh, cable TV box on top of my TV, and it was 10 p.m. No, I didn't know at that time. What I did was I called my friend Linda, who lived in Carlsbad, California, and I just said, I'm sorry, I know it's late for you, just got home from work, whatever. Um, I just had a horrible experience. She goes, oh, no, no, it's still early at my end. I don't have to go to work yet. And then I looked at the clock in the
Oh,
cable box on top of my TV, and it was like 10 p.m. Now, I fell asleep after midnight. So they returned me to a point in time 2 hours before they initially
before you had
abducted me.
left. It was a,
Exactly.
yes.
And then one of my close friends that I've worked with a lot, and I knew her story very well. And this is long before I heard of these 20 and back stories.
Mhm.
She would be taken by the same naval intelligence group that was abducting me, because me and Lorena oftentimes would be abducted together in these Milab naval operations.
Mhm.
Uh, and they would keep her. She said it seemed like I'd be there for weeks, either underground or off-world somewhere, alternate reality. And she'd be pleading with them, please, you gotta get me back. They're gonna report me missing. I gotta get my kids ready for school. We think of these mundane things, right?
Totally.
They say,
Yeah.
don't worry, we'll send you back and you'll have plenty of time to get your kids ready. And that's what they would do. After what seemed like weeks with the Navy, they'd send her back and she'd get up just in time to get her kids ready, no rush, get them off to school. So even back then, before they put this tag 20 and back, I knew. And plus, what happened to me, where either it was a mistake or they purposely returned me to a point in time before they had abducted me, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you just look at those two examples, yes, I can see how a 20 and back, the only kind of thing that, and Daryl James talks about this and others, because how do they get us back to the way we should look? Well, I'm sure there's a process by now whereby they do that, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, I'm just going all over the place, and Want to say
No,
something?
it's wonderful. I know my audience can appreciate what you've had to share today. I wanted to ask you in all of this because it's geared toward the more nefarious aspects of abduction and those things that go against our conscious free will. Have there been benevolent encounters for you at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let me give you an example. There's a place called, routinely referred to as the Gosford Glyphs, but really it's in the suburb of Carryong. So the Carryong Glyphs, they're world famous. You can see videos of this. They've gone out of their way to try to debunk this, right? There are proto-Egyptian hieroglyphs there, which I've
Mm.
seen,
Mhm.
but it's a mystical ancient Aboriginal site as well. And both sides of the polarity equation work there. There are times when people with a darker, more nefarious motive, they go there, they do their own rituals to kind of, desecrate the place and do things their own way. And then
Mhm.
people more of the light come there and try to cleanse and, fix up the damage that had been done. There's a big tree we call the grandma tree there, right? Which idiots have carved initials into and stuff. But it's a very sacred tree. On the plateau above the carry-on glyphs, there's what's it called, the healing table or something like that, and it's only meant for women, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I've only known of one male who's laid in it who's not been adversely affected, and the way it was described to me was uh, the reason why this particular male had laid in it and not been affected. I mean, I'm talking nosebleeds, things like that have happened to males who've laid in this thing. Was he's a gay man. He's quite effeminate in kind of energy, right?
Oh,
He exudes
energetically, yeah.
the
Yeah.
feminine anima, and
Mhm.
so for whatever reason, spirits or energetically, he came out of it with a good experience. Now, when women lay in it, they'll see their deceased ancestors, they'll see Aboriginal medicine women in the spirit world, etc. So they'll see Palladians because the Palladians are the ones apparently that had to do with creating that healing table, right?
Hmm.
The lore in Australia is the Aboriginals of all these different tribes, they harken back to the Pleiades as their place of origin, right?
Mhm.
Just like as the Lakota, they say the Sioux, the
Yeah.
Lakota Sioux, that they're from the Sirius, and we have different points of origin in these stories. Well, in Australia, the Pleiades overwhelmingly is the place of origin for that a lot of these Aboriginal groups claim to come from, and so the Pleiadians made this healing table, and I didn't have all the pictures of the healing table. I didn't get them till later, but I should have asked earlier. But I didn't have anything to work off of. So me and one of my psychic friends went looking for the healing table, right? Now, we got there late in the day. You shouldn't get there late in the day in certain parts of the year because there's big venomous snakes around, right?
Mhm.
We'd seen one of them, big brown snake, actually. And we're walking towards climbing up to get to that plateau. My friend says she heard a very like low guttural growl, like from a wolf. And I'm thinking, oh, dog man, right? Anyway, we get up to the plateau. We're walking around. It's getting dark under a time constraint because we got to get out of there before nightfall. Otherwise, more snakes will come out, right? And she says, there's a Palladian here. He's trying to guide us. And she says he's about 7, 8 feet tall. He's got a big gown and he's, beckoning us, come this way, come that. Turned out we passed this healing table several times. I didn't know what it looked like, right?
Oh, so you were looking at it and you kind of, yeah. You,
I didn't know. I'm thinking like a flat table. It's more like the bottom half of like a sarcophagus or bottom half of like a MRI, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
I'm
And to
looking for
clarify
something flat.
for the audience, this is in Oz, correct? This is Australia.
Australia, yes. Now I've known people that have laid in there, okay, and they've had Palladian like Nordic women appear to them. They've had Aboriginal, female elders appear in the spirit, right?
Yeah.
So my friend wanted to lay down. Now I males, we have to be like minimum like 15 feet away. Or our lady friends or whoever is
Mhm.
laying down, we have to respectfully be outside that, perimeter, right? So the plan was eventually we did. I talked to my friends Stephen and Evan Strong, who investigate that place and know every square inch of it. I should have asked earlier. Evan wound up sending me a series of photos. Oh, that's what it looked like, right? Passed this thing like half a dozen times that night, right? So I know where it is now. I know what it looks like, but I didn't know then.
So what
So
happened?
well, when we came back, she laid into it and had a really great blissful experience. And um, yeah, as a matter of fact, this it's been dropped unfortunately, but this is my um, selenite wand, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I call it Dragon Fang. And one of the guys that my friend and I brought out there, he puts these selenite wands together and sells them for like a good amount of money, but they're worth it. And we just happened to meet at a crystal shop in in here in Australia, and the guy was talking about the carry on Gossamer glyphs. I go, oh, we can take you there, right? So we did, and we did this thing, frequency thing around the grandma tree. Then we went up to the plateau, right? Before that, we looked at the glyphs down below. Then we climbed up to the plateau where my friend laid down, and the guy and I, were 15 feet away from it, what have you. So we were back a few times, but people really do. But the point being is that there was a Palladian there that was trying to guide us,
Mhm.
but we just couldn't find it. And there were other occasions when, and don't have time to really get into it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've
But this
had
was
what I
a
would
this was
consider,
a to the point though, this was a benevolent encounter for you.
yes,
Yeah.
this is where these Palladians, and in my background, when I work with some of these world class, uh, like ET medium types, right?
Yeah.
There's a number of different ETs that have, uh, been connected with me that have appeared of different types. Like they're not all one type of beings,
Yeah.
bluish beings and what have you. And so, and there were times, there was a lecture I was giving in, where was I? I think I was in Melbourne, and there was these a couple. They were very psychic, and they said, well, there was these two ETs that showed up alongside of you when you were on the podium giving the lecture, right? Sometimes I can feel a presence of ETs when I'm giving a presentation, right?
Yeah.
And apparently, these male and a female showed up next to me, and they were wearing a long gowns, and
Mhm.
long hair and what have you. So I don't really know. They look human. They didn't really look alien like. But
Yeah.
there was an occasion in San Diego where I was giving a lecture. Yeah, it was San Diego, and a guy was sitting there at the front row. I just thought he was taking notes. Turned out he was drawing a sketch
Of what was
after the he was drawing a sketch after the lecture. He pulls me aside. He shows me a picture of this little ET. I go, oh, interesting. And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if it's an ET that showed up alongside me. But he goes, oh, no, that ET showed up over your face while you were
Mhm.
giving a speech, the speech, right? Like it
Mhm.
had like momentarily overshadowed me or something. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But he was intuitive enough to have seen that. So,
Yeah.
point being is that, see, we are the sum of all of our, uh, you know, composite characters. And a lot of these, as you know, a lot of these ETs, whether they're of the positive or negative variety, when they look at us and interact with us, they don't necessarily interact with the you and I in the here and now.
Yeah.
They look at us in totality. They remember you as when you were an ET,
Yeah.
right? And see, and what happens sometimes in some of these off-world experiences with ETs, I think there's an oversoul aspect when certain things have to be right energetically, astronomically, our vibe, whatever the case may be. We are more prone on a standalone basis to just go dimension hopping when we're asleep. And sometimes to the point where we just go out into the cosmos and start interacting with this, that, or the other ET race. And they see us as equals. They don't see us patting us on the head. Here's James again, or here's Rebecca. It's like
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
they see us who as we really are. And what we need to get back to is, and a source of frustration for me is a lot of these ETs, the deep black military, etc., they know a lot more about ourselves than we do
Yeah.
because of the amnesic barriers, the manipulation of our energy bodies, and the karmic interference over time. Because a lot of these negative aliens, especially, track us lifetime after lifetime. Oh, here's Rebecca coming back into earthly plane or whatever she's going to call herself this time, right? They know it's you, right? And it's almost like they have a reception party waiting for us. Oh yeah, this stage of our life, we're going to put this person and hopefully derail her in this direction for a while. And, I've gone through the same thing where it's like we have to navigate the slalom course, right?
Oh,
Bad
that's a good way to put
association being,
it. Yes. Yeah, yeah.
it's bad
Yeah.
association being what it is. We are who we associate with, never losing sight of the fact that we must take self accountability, self responsibility. It's
Yeah.
us hanging around these people that are causing us to have bad outcomes and making poor choices and bad decisions. Let's take responsibility for ourselves. But when you zoom out and you're able to look back in hindsight, oh yeah, I can see now why I went off the rails here, there. The way this cosmic chessboard game of life is,
Mm.
both these ETs of varying polarities can at times, almost like in an angelic sense, put certain people that they work through in our life, in our path, to nudge us this way or that, or get us back on course. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I know if the opportunity presented itself that, we would do the same thing. I know if that I was out there cavorting around the multiverse, that I would want to help other beings that are trying to break free of oppression. I would like to help other beings, continue their
Yeah.
spiritual. So,
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that part of it too. I
yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah. Well, and people can find James at Cosmic Switchboard. Do you want to just tell us? I mean, there's so much information at Cosmic Switchboard. Listen to his podcast and read the research. Can you say a little bit more about
Yeah,
your
the Cosmic Switchboard, it's been going on for several years now, and I've had a number of great guests, and a lot of it is experience heavy. There's a lot of people like us
yeah.
talking about their experiences, and I've also had some very high level guest investigators, and I also do a lot of my own commentaries, right, where I choose to talk about this, that, or the other subject, and I just talk and I provide
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
insight about various topics. So you can find me at thecosmicswitchboard.com. You can also find me on Facebook and on Twitter. On Twitter, I'm Cosmic 29, Cosmic Switch 29. And
Mhm.
then on Facebook, James Bartley /148. There must have been 147 James Bartleys before me, but James Bartley
Yeah.
/148.
Well, oh my God, we need to continue this conversation, and I'm so glad you've been with us today, James. Like, what a wealth
I'm
of
so glad to be
information.
here. I'm
Yeah.
sorry I was jumping all over the place. It was like one of those
It's
movies where, we're back to his childhood again.
well,
So
I feel
sorry
like
about
that
that.
too. I mean, because it's so nonlinear, it's so quantum in nature, and
It
there's
is.
so many of the
Yeah.
experiences. It's hard to hammer it down into, a very tidy package, honestly.
That's
So,
the term I was looking for. We are the sum of all of our parts, right? And it's difficult to quantify this in a linear time sense. And
yeah.
especially you factor in the time travel aspect, it just muddies the water even further. So it really just where our consciousness is at any one time, quote
Yeah.
unquote, right?
Well, and I think
But
us
definitely
speaking.
want to have you on my show too.
Yeah, let's do that. Well, and I think this is helpful to help people metabolize their experiences that don't hammer out into linear. It can be difficult
Yes.
to explain these things to ourselves, as we said in the very beginning. We can tend to brush them off if they don't make sense to our linear framework. So thanks for
The
speaking.
time we got left here, if you don't mind, uh, I went to that conference, the Full Disclosure Now conference,
Mhm.
and I met a guy named David, right? I've had him on my show in the recent past, and he was sitting there in a panel the first day, and there was a off-world kind of Mars experience type panel, and
Mhm.
I'm looking at this guy. I go, that guy looks really, really familiar. And then I look over at the other end of the podium, other end of the stage, turned out to be Daryl James. That guy looks really, really familiar
Oh,
too, because
yeah.
there was a period of time, uh, 20 years, ironically, 20 years and back, so to speak, in a linear sense, when I had lots and lots of dreams and experiences of being with naval personnel. And see, with me, there was always a fudge factor. Well, are they taking the fact that at a conscious level, I've spent all this time, well, not only growing up and being at all these different naval air stations and facilities as a boy, I've actually visited two aircraft carriers on these Tiger cruises, right?
Mm.
And also as an adult, I worked at the Naval Air Force's headquarters. Are they taking that aspect of my memory and kind of like superimposing it upon these dreams or whatever? Because like I was trying to figure out, why am I seeing Navy people in my dreams, right?
Mhm.
And and then David, because the second day I was on a panel, and this time there was a lady to my left, and to her left was David. And I go, that's the guy that I was looking at yesterday. He's so familiar. And then later he pulls me aside. He goes, I've seen you on board these ships in the secret space programs. And I'm thinking, meanwhile, I'm thinking I've seen this guy somewhere. And
Oh,
he tells me a little known story because I had this dream, quote unquote. And see, in my off world, there's basically two types of scenarios or settings in these big man-made, I feel, off-world vessels, naval vessels, let's call them. And in one of the scenarios, there doesn't seem to be a lot of light. It seems to be a lot of dim spaces, right? A lot
yes.
of darkness. It wasn't like in Star Trek where everything's all lit up, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and I mentioned that to him because, well, there's a reason for that because a lot of the beings on that craft that they don't like that light. Like some of the reptilians on board, they don't. It makes sense to me, you know.
Yes.
That's why they spend so much time in these cavern systems, is not used to light the way we are. So, out of deference to them, they kept the lights dim. But he said something which nobody had known about. I had this dream of being in these weird uniforms and in a dim kind of room, and we were poring over a map, and I gotten so frustrated that I just, very childishly and immaturely, if that's proper English, just started ripping the map to shreds and just toss it to the ground and toss the pieces, in the air. And I just got frustrated and deflation set in, right? And he told me, yeah, I remember on one occasion you got so mad you ripped this map apart, and I go, that's how could he know something like that, you know? And
Mm.
and then the other settings I've seen on naval vessels where in a Earth surface level Navy warship, it's like space is at a premium. So you have all this piping and rails and bulkheads, everything is like kind of hemmed in. You got to kind of go up and down these gangways and ladders. Everything is kind of you don't have much space. But on board some of these ships, you have lots of space. And everything is very utilitarian. You don't see, at least I didn't see the stuff you would associate with a surface vessel on Earth, pipes and railings. You don't see that kind of stuff. It's very pragmatic. It's very the way that the whole layout is, right? And the colors are kind of like that I remember are kind of cream colored, kind of almost like a khaki color to the interior of some of these craft. And in one of these experiences, I was being chased by Tom Cruise of all people. And when I saw him, he didn't look like Tom Cruise Maverick. He looked like Tom Cruise Lestat. Like he was all pale and he had like longer hair. And he was in a naval khaki officer's uniform. And he was chasing me through this big naval vessel. And that's a whole nother story. But thank you so much for having me on. And I definitely want to have you on my show as well.
Oh, James Bartley, thank you so much. So many things. And I'm glad now in this time, I feel like there's more and more of us speaking to these experiences, which is assisting disclosure. So whether you think you ran all over the map today or didn't, we're forwarding the mission here. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And I will be speaking at the Super Soldier Activation Conference in Orlando coming up here October 8th through 12th. You can join me there online if you want, or live in person. And as well, if you want to do some deeply transformative one-on-one work with me, you can certainly book Starseed coaching, intuitive healing, galactic attunements, inner child integration, and so much more through my website. The links are below, and certainly check out Cosmic Switchboard with James Bartley. And James, we will certainly be having you back on. Thank you so
Likewise. I
much.
would love to have you on my show. Bye for
Okay.
now.
just to mention this briefly, I have a mother and father from a previous lifetime, Indigenous mother and father, and I just call them simply mother and father. They've been with me every day for about 2.5 years. They were my parents from a previous lifetime with the Crow people. And they've helped me heal so much. They've done soul retrieval work for me. They helped me journey to get parts back. And that's actually ongoing. Like even today, I was working with them this morning. And their love is so beautifully unconditional.